And good morning, everyone. My name is Rick Rosati, and I want to thank you for giving me a few minutes at your training session today to discuss some important points regarding multi-patient or mass casualty incident management. I want to thank Jen for inviting me this morning. I sure do wish I was with you guys, but due to a schedule change in the competition schedule of a couple of athletes that I'm working with, it's made it impossible for me to be there. I do so miss working in EMS and hope maybe in the next few months I will be returning to my role as a paramedic here in Monroe County. But anyways, as things go today, I wanted to talk a little bit about things that I've learned in EMS and fire service pertaining to something bad happening in multi-patient events. And the first question I want to ask you guys is, when will we learn? When will we learn that our initial EMS education is simply not enough to deal with these types of events? And what I mean by that is anything from the brand new provider that gets their EMT or paramedic card, gets out on the ambulance one day, and the very next day they could be the first one in on a large scale event. That really should not happen, but unfortunately it is the truth. And I think it's time that you guys that are still in uniform, and certainly in the leadership positions, that you work to mentor a little bit more before people are thrust into that giant role. And the next item there says planning for it can happen here. And so many times talking to folks regarding domestic preparedness over these last many years, and having been coast to coast talking on maintaining a culture of preparedness, I hear from folks all over the place that say it can't happen here. It's not going to happen in our neighborhood. We're not going to have that type of event. And you know, folks, what I've learned is simply that it can happen anywhere. And we have to realize that that is the society that we live in, whether it's a terrorist or intentional act, or it's the all too often the common gunfire related, firearms related type of situation. It can happen here, and we've got to be planning for it. Planning is the key to success in these events, from the newest person right on through the agency leaders. And then lastly, I don't think we should wait for the bad thing to happen in order to use the skills and stuff that you're going to be learning today during your training session. We oftentimes take our MCI or triage training and we just wrap it up, put it in a box, set it up on a mental shelf, and say we're going to use this when the bad thing does happen. But in fact, I would submit that if you do that, and if you ignore that knowledge, only to be used when something bad happens, that you're not going to be very good at it. You're not going to be able to recall the stuff that you need to have at the front of your mind, at your fingertips, to get the job done as far as managing that situation goes. So I'm going to challenge you to use the things that we're going to talk about here in the next couple minutes on an everyday basis. And in fact, that's what it's designed to do. In order to use our MCI or mass casualty triage training every day, I've come up with a LOCATE acronym: location, obstacles, conditions, accessories, treatment, and then evaluate, educate, and extra help. Well, let's just jump right into it. Location. Really, what type of occupancy are you at? How well do you know your district? What is going on, or what hazards exist in that area of your district? Now, you should be thinking about those things, or I recommend that you're thinking about those things each and every time you pull out of the garage. Every time the vehicle leaves the barn, you should be thinking, what am I getting into? Now, some of us do that, some of us don't. Some of us believe that it's better to be focused on patient care issues, and perhaps there's validity both ways. But what I'm challenging you to do here is that regardless if you're going into a small neighborhood, a bedroom community, or you're going into a light industrial situation, you need to know what's going on at that location. And that is something that'll help keep you safe, as well as provide good care to the people that you serve. Next is obstacles. And obstacles in this case don't have to be anything major, such as building collapses or vehicles on fire, some such things like that. But obstacles for the everyday line of thinking can include lifts and ramps, things you've got to get over, customized vehicles for getting people into and out of, commercial buildings, getting off the ground floor, for instance, and certain privacy issues of what you find in someone's home, or other legal issues when you find illegal materials that need to be dealt with by law enforcement. Those are all obstacles to giving care and keeping yourself safe. Next, we have conditions, medical conditions, living conditions, and changes in conditions. When you are assessing someone, whether it's in the mass casualty event or the single patient event, you have to consider whatever medical conditions or past medical history is going on with the patient and how that impacts their medical or traumatic situation at this time. Living conditions also play a role. What else is going on in the home? What other exposures might they have? Medication exposures, multiple or polypharm situations can exist in a variety of living conditions. And then changes in conditions. What's happened in the home or in the work environment recently that could be contributing to this person's downfall or to the downward spiral of a given event. Next is accessories. Understanding that if we're dealing with a large-scale event and multiple people, multiple patients, that they could need various accessories to ambulate on a good day. Canes and walkers come to mind, and that slows people down. Obviously, there's additional personnel needed to take care of them or to get them out of the danger zone and into safety. And then, are they able to use those accessories under stress? Also consider the number of people that are wheelchair bound and have zero mobility outside of a motorized wheelchair. How many of those wheelchairs can we charge? Can we move? And certainly, if we can't take the chair with us and we have to evacuate people, how are we doing that? Understanding that those chairs can weigh upwards of 300 to 400 pounds. Oxygen and nebulizer units become an important factor, especially if we have to stage or shelter people for a period of time, as you might do with a secondary triage or a medical staging area, and having enough oxygen and nebulizers to give someone their standard nebulizer treatment, albeit they may not be ill or acutely sick at this time, but they might need their routine medications through a nebulizer or some other delivery device. I'm kind of focused on nebulizer, but it could be any delivery device. And you've got to be prepared for that. People may be carrying their own, and you need to be able to help them with that delivery. Again, not to focus too much on oxygen and nebulizers, it just happens to be the one that comes to mind. Next is treatment in the LOCATE acronym. Treatment. Assess your treatment really is guided by your assessment, and this is something that we've got to focus on in the mass casualty situation. Although we might not be giving much treatment, especially in the initial stages, but in the secondary and treatment areas, reassessment is key. And in the everyday situation, I think you guys already know that assessing is paramount. Understanding prior treatment, what's been done by providers before you. And in the everyday situation, the person at home may have been recently released from a hospital. And we're seeing that more and more in healthcare, where patients are sent home earlier and earlier and are getting some level of health care in the home that would traditionally be delivered by trained staff in the hospital. And we're seeing a lot of folks on home antibiotics, other therapies, being sent home with PICC lines and other implanted devices that would ordinarily have to be in the hospital. And we're going to encounter them. Now, encountering them on an everyday basis gives us the moment of pause to slow things down and gather data. But dealing with those types of situations with various lines and access points in the mass casualty or multi-patient event can become a little challenging. And then understanding any treatment that's already in progress. E is for evaluate, educate, and extra help. And in the setting of mass casualty incident management, the E for extra help is probably the biggest one that we should talk about today just briefly. And that, simply put, is calling resources early and understanding that when something truly catastrophic happens, there may be multiple requests or multiple demands for your services. Now, with that in mind, understand that routine calls for service are going to continue to come in. It'd be nice if we were managing a large-scale event that the routine calls for the broken eyelashes and stubbed toes and the daily abuses of the EMS system would come to a halt, but unfortunately they don't. And people still have their legitimate medical emergencies that are not tied to our large-scale event. So calling extra help does not just mean calling appropriate resources to the scene, but it means bringing extra help into a given jurisdiction that's impacted by a large-scale event, rather than waiting a period of time. And that is important for a number of reasons, but understanding that when we start talking about something truly catastrophic, whether it's a natural or man-made disaster, that there will be a fight for resources, and those resources will be allocated long before they come to you. And so I think you've got to get ahead of that curve. So again, our locate for EMS is location, obstacles, conditions, accessories, treatment, evaluate, educate, and extra help. I want to quickly move on here to talk about a little, just shift gears just a little bit. And this next one, next acronym is called LEVEL. And I'd like you to try and remember this when you are setting up your various triage and staging locations and setting up emergency incident rehabilitation at these large-scale events. And remember, these large-scale events are not just about the patients in the community. These large-scale events are about us, the responders, and how we're going to be taking care of ourselves and making sure we don't get injured or become a victim. So I want to use the acronym LEVEL. Location should be free from fumes, especially exhaust fumes from the vehicles, or free from fumes from smoke or any other nastiness going on. And that location should have access and egress points. The more the better. Now, try not to get yourself boxed in or have only one way in and one way out. E is for estimate the number of responders, and this is important for accountability. And accountability systems in EMS have finally caught on over the last 5 to 7 years, I'd say, and making sure that you are working into someone's accountability system is great, but it does not absolve you of the responsibility of having your own internal accountability system for your folks in case something catastrophic happens to another system. So estimate the number of responders. That includes yours, other agencies that are working on the scene, and non-traditional responders, which should include places like the utilities, law enforcement, other non-traditional responders that may come to a scene. V is for vehicles, ambulances, stretchers, special delivery vehicles, and trailers. How are they getting to the scene, and how will their placement impact your overall location needs for getting equipment in, getting patients out, and calling extra sources in? A note about stretchers: it's really kind of odd here in 2016 to be thinking we're talking about stretchers, but I still notice that many services have special stretcher mounts, and one agency's stretchers may or may not fit in another agency's vehicles. And let's face it, mass casualty incidents are oftentimes like a high school prom. You may not leave with the same date that you came with, and your patient and your stretcher with you might end up in somebody else's ambulance going home with a different date than the one you came with, so to speak. E is for environment, and this is an important one here. Understanding what the current weather happens to be, understanding the impact of changes, or what the weather forecast will be, and what's going to happen when that weather actually changes, and how that's going to impact your given event. And then L is for leadership, and leadership has to be appropriate within the incident command system, which I kind of say that tongue-in-cheek because the National Incident Management System debacle since September 11th certainly hasn't gotten any better, and I think I just better leave that one alone. And lastly, I want to leave you with this one for creating a functional emergency incident rehabilitation. Starting in the upper left-hand corner, pre-incident planning and having an incident action plan really does pertain to EMS as well as the fire service. Having those things are a factor in pre-planning. Emergency incident rehabilitation should be a part of the incident action plan and should certainly account for changing conditions both in the situation and the environment that you're working with. Making a commitment to emergency incident rehabilitation requires agencies to overcome the myths, making it a priority in your training and in your education. and training, using it at training and live events. And it definitely is something that you have to live by, and making sure that all responders are part of a accountability system and part of the emergency incident rehabilitation system. And this is oftentimes where EMS and law enforcement kind of get left out and need to be included in that. Effective incident safety officer really should be a part of almost every segment of a large-scale event, not just the overall event, but even the various divisions or sectors within that event, including accountability. And you have to account for everyone, as I said before, responders from your agency and others, as well as non-traditional responders. Maintaining unit integrity, and by all means, accountability includes eliminating freelancing. And the bottom left, to finish this off, is prehab, or taking care of yourself before the event happens. And it's a challenge for us because our off-duty choices do impact our on-duty response, and we have to be cognizant of that. And it's food and hydration mainly, is how prepared are we to go to work for a protracted period of time in a variety of environmental conditions, based on our last meal or our last fluid intake, keeping ourselves hydrated, nourished properly, and in reasonable physical health. And of course, your health and the environment that you're working in all play a role in incident prehab. So this has been a little bit of a whirlwind tour. Ideally, I'd be with you and spend a little bit more time on something like this, but as I said earlier, I couldn't be there today. But I do want to thank you for allowing me to have a few minutes with you. And, Jen knows how to get a hold of me. And if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to talk to you, and feel free to call anytime. And so with that, just wish you a great training day, and stay safe, everybody.